Hey there, welcome to the NFL DFS build for this Monday Night Football DFS slate at DraftKings. I already pushed out a 2-game main slate video for the Jaguars Bills and the Bengals Commanders games. You can catch that at the end of this video or visit our channel DFS build and see it there. Hopefully these videos are helpful, and if they are, please give them a like and also subscribe to the channel. Helps you get alerted to more future videos and also helps us know that we're doing something right. Taylor had some really good picks on the main slate when we broke it down earlier last week. Overall, I think we should have been pretty helpful to everybody. I broke even. I think I profited mildly, and I know Taylor had a hit. So hopefully that trickled down to everybody watching, and we can do it again tonight. If it's not on the 2-game main slate, maybe it is in the showdown slate. I did mention that we probably wouldn't have time to do this, but here we are. Taylor said, let's do it. So we got the Jaguars visiting the Bills. Jacksonville's 0-2. Buffalo is 2-0. The Bills are 5.5-point favorites, and the game has a 45.5-point game total. So I don't think any of that really matters. I guess the Jaguars will be a little bit more desperate than they usually would, so maybe that gives them a little bit more of an edge. But let's get right into it, Taylor. At the captain slot, obviously Josh Allen is the most obvious captain. James Cook went off with 3 touchdowns last game for Buffalo, so he's also in the mix. And then the best player for the Jaguars is Travis Etienne. His workload has not been as monstrous as it was last year, but those are probably the 3 guys we should be looking at in the captain slot first. Josh Allen coming in with 22% ownership, and nobody has even half of that. So of those 3 guys, who are you feeling the best about tonight?
It's definitely Allen. For me, a lot obvious reasons. Home, he's got the rushing touchdown upside, goal line situations. Didn't see it last time, but we did see it in week 1. I think he scored a couple on his own. As of now, I'm not getting to Cook and captain at all, so that's fucking horrifying after he burned me to death 2 weeks ago, or I guess last Thursday night. But it is what it is. ETN, I'm pretty heavily under on in captain as of now, but I do have him quite a bit in flex. Ditto for Cook. It just looks like I'm getting my exposure to them in flex more than captain. But Allen, I think I'm going to be. I mean, what's his captain projected ownership? Like
22.
Yeah, I'm around that, so that'll probably be where I wind up.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's the Bills passing game for me. I think I'm just going to bet. I'm going to take a hard stance here and bet on the Bills passing game being what gets them over the top. The Jaguars defense is okay, but it hasn't been especially problematic for quarterbacks. They're like, I don't know, 11th worst or something. And so it's just a middle average matchup. So it's Josh Allen. He can do so much damage across the board. So I think obviously he is a safe captain play. He's got the best ceiling, best floor of anybody in this game. It does feel gross to not captain Cook. And I'm not really saying to have 0 captain exposure to Cook. But I do think it's unlikely that they both smash in the same game. Just the first 2. Because, look at the first 2 weeks, man. In week 1, Josh Allen had 32 fantasy points. James Cook had 13. In week 2, Josh Allen had 9 fantasy points. James Cook had 28. So is that always going to be the case? No, because James Cook could also score as a receiver. But
he did
I just think that
week.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he did. Yeah, good call. So, I just think, though, one of them is probably going to smash for sure. And then the other one will probably just be okay. So you can still roster the other guy. But in between the 2, if you're going to play James Cook, I still would probably play Josh Allen. But I think if you're going to play Josh Allen, you don't have to play James Cook. So that's where I'm at with it. I think it is interesting that James Cook is only 10% on the captain. Josh Allen being there by default makes everybody else pretty low owned in captain, right? So to get different, I'm probably going to slide Josh Allen to the flex and then try to hit whoever that receiving option is that's going to blow up for him. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. That said, if you want to play it the other way, just eat that chalky captain spot. That is totally fine. You can absolutely win that way. You just have to get very different in the flex if you're going to do that. So I
had a rule last week at fucked me bad. It was, I had no Cook or Allen. I split them up in every lineup. And I should have checked. It was laziness on my part. I didn't check to see, but that essentially forced Cook out of all of my lineups because I think Allen wound up in the vast majority of them, and I just didn't have Cook at all. So I think I bricked the entire slate. I will not have that rule tonight. Not because it burned me, but just because I think, as we saw, there's a route for both of them, or there can be a route for both of them. We didn't see it since we saw Allen not do anything and Cook did everything, but there's a route for them both to get there, like you said. So I think I'm not going to split them up tonight on purpose.
Yeah, I think you could just go either way on it. I mean, like, I don't think that was a bad flag plant to take. Like, okay, well, if Josh Allen's going to go off, James Cook probably will not. That's probably correct. But the only problem is
with a
it was the other way.
Rushing upside, like Jalen Hurts and Saquon, like guys that can get there on their own with the legs, like we saw Allen in week 1. Just generally think like if you're looking for a ceiling for both, you're unlikely to get a ceiling from both in the same game, I think. So I think the spirit of the rule is fine. But I think if you do that, then to be sure that you're not completely fading one of them. Like get some of them if you're entering multiple lineups.
Yeah, it is worth noting, by the way, also, like in games like this, where there are not a ton of really elite fantasy options. Like this is not like Chiefs the Falcons game where you had Mahomes, London, Rashee Rice, Kelsey. You just had all these other guys. You know, there's so many dudes that you're considering for captain. There's so many guys you want to cram into your lineup. That's not really the case here. I think the main 3 guys you're looking at the captain are the 3 guys you probably really need in your lineup, most likely. So I'm okay with putting Cook in the flex if you captain Josh. I'm okay with flexing both of them. But my priority is going to be Josh across the board. I by the way, I don't mind Etienne as a captain. Probably mostly a flex play for me because I favor the Bills in this matchup. But if he's going to be under 10% owned, we know he does have a ceiling. And the Bills are 31st against fantasy running backs or something. It's not good. That's what DK has it listed at. But let's see what they actually are. Let's see. Yeah, 31st. It's not good. They have not been good against running backs at all so far. Because we know Achane went off in week 2. I can't remember. They faced the Cardinals. Yeah, James Conner had a good week in week 1 too. So Etienne looks good. I'll probably mostly play him in the flex because I'm probably my strategy is going to be targeting Bills receivers and hoping I hit one with Allen and Etienne and Allen and or Cook or whatever in the flex. All right. So looking down to the next tier, obviously you have Trevor Lawrence. It gets pretty gross after that. So you can absolutely argue for Lawrence to get to be captain here because he's only coming in at like just under 10% ownership. I don't think he has a massive ceiling for this game. The Bills have been pretty good against the pass, and he hasn't been good so far on the year. I mean, there's a very strong argument he just isn't good, right? So I don't really like him in the captain. How do you feel about it?
I like it quite a bit. The naturally contrarian way to play this game is to play the Jacksonville side of it heavy, right, compared to Buffalo, with Buffalo being favored at home. Jacksonville hasn't done anything offensively, particularly through the air so far. I think Lawrence has 1 touchdown. It's not been good, but you know, it's 1 game sample that you're looking for. And I think Lawrence is naturally going to be under-owned in captain compared to Allen and others on the Buffalo side. So it's not like it's going to be contrarian, though. He's still a quarterback in a showdown game, so naturally he's going to be somewhat popular. I'm getting to him a ton. The captain I have the most, we haven't gotten to yet, and it's Gabe Davis in the the old revenge game.
True revenge, baby.
Exactly.
It's possible.
He's played 94.5% of the snaps so far, leading all Jacksonville receivers. I think he also leads them in targets so far. Only a 2-game sample, of course, so can't draw too many conclusions, but seems like he might be a little more heavily involved on a per-play basis than he was in Buffalo, at least, where he's kind of just a big play guy. Obviously still has that home run upside that you're looking for. And if Jacksonville's playing from behind, naturally, we think they're going to have to throw it more. So Gabe Davis at a decent price tag, $8,100. As a captain, I think is a pretty good play that helps you fit in a lot of other stuff without going too deep. But yeah, once you get past Davis, Allen, and Lawrence, my highest owned captains are Kirk, Brenton Strange, and Brian Thomas. So I'm kind of leaning heavily into the Jacksonville side of it through the air, just thinking they're going to have to throw it more.
Okay, so number 1, I agree. Obviously, anytime there's like a favorite or like everything's pointing to one side, playing the other side in general makes a lot of sense because you're just getting massive edge. I think you can still do that by not targeting Jaguars in the captain. I think you can play Josh Allen in the captain and go a little bit Jaguars heavy, like just play with the approach that they're going to be playing from behind, which I think they will be. Yeah. And then you can accrue stats that way. So you mentioned Strange, love Strange. I mean, I would imagine he's going to be pretty owned. There's a very good case for him to be owned. I talked about him on the main slate. I mean, he's not going to be captain. So if you want to play that angle, and really just load up. You can get Strange at a 4.5K in the captain slot. I am actually into that a little bit. Don't mind that at all. Prefer him in the flex, but he's probably going to be owned there. So I don't mind that. My favorite captain, actually, besides Josh Allen, is Keon Coleman. That dude did nothing last week. He is not going to be owned at all. The guys who are going to garner ownership beyond Josh Allen for the Bills, it's going to be James Cook, obviously, and then there's going to be Dalton Kincaid, who does not have a good matchup. The Jaguars have played tight ends very well. He's still kind of splitting, working with Dawson Knox. He just hasn't done anything. Like, the Bills just run and spread the ball around. Josh Allen just throws to the open dude. There's nobody like featured here. So even though Khalil Shakir looks great and I would entertain him in the flex play, not super into him at 12.9K for the captain. That's not something I want to do. So the guy I'm looking at the most after Josh Allen is Keon Coleman, because he's only 4.7% owned in the captain. Not really that expensive, so I can still get the guys I want. And the other thing is, last week, people think he was terrible or something, but they just didn't throw the ball. Josh Allen threw the ball 19 times. James Cook dominated that game. And will that happen again this week? I don't know. The matchups and the strategy changes all the time. But Keon Coleman last week played 91% of the snaps. That is what I'm looking for. I don't really care about the results every time. It's about process. And if you're going to play that much and provide a massive ownership leverage like that, I'm in. So that's probably my favorite captain just for tournaments. And I'm not really seeing anybody else that I'm like really drawn to, but I do like other flex guys that we'll talk about. Are there any other captain guys that you want to give a shout out for tonight?
Didn't really elaborate on Kirk and Brian Thomas, but Thomas we've seen get some red zone looks. I think he scored. He might have scored in both weeks. I know he scored in week 1. I guess not both weeks because Lawrence has one touchdown.
He had like a 66-yard catch in week 2, though.
Yeah, so obviously the big play stuff is there. He and Gabe Davis both really have that, and so does Kirk. So they're like, one play can really get you there with any of these guys.
Right.
The only issue with Kirk is that he's pretty expensive. He's 10.5 in the captain, so he's considerably more pricey than Gabe Davis in particular. But just to get different, I don't think they're going to be very owned in captain. Curtis Samuel, I'm kind of wondering what's up with this. Like, he's basically the 4th receiver now for Buffalo.
Yeah.
He's played 27% of the snaps, which is kind of shocking, with Mac Hollins playing a way bigger role than I think anyone expected. But yeah, I have one Cam Little captain lineup. Apparently he's the Jacksonville kicker, but not really something to get excited about.
What is Mac Hollins' price, actually? I liked him last time there in a showdown, and he had no catches on one target. In week 1, he scored a touchdown, though, and he's 3.3K. I don't know. It's just like, if you're going to punt at captain, there's got to be a lot of good logic to it, because they still need to hit.
I'm not going to play Mac Hollins at captain. I'll play him a little in flex, but that's it.
No, but you talked about Strange shooting. By the way, I'm in on Brian Thomas Jr. I'm probably going to play him in the flex, but I'm okay with getting a sprinkling of him in captain too. Just, he has massive upside. So you got to think Christian Kirk at some point is going to be decent. He's been horrific so far. 1 catch for 30 yards in week 1, 1 catch for -1 yards in week 2. So the role has to grow at some point. I don't know if this is really the spot for it to happen, because the Bills are not really a fun matchup. But yeah. But the punt here, I think if you're going to go all the way down, it would probably be Strange, who you mentioned, at 4.5K. Played 68% of the snaps last week. Evan Ingram is out. He had 9.5 fantasy points, 3 catches on 6 targets with 65 yards. By the way, in the draft last year, he was their 2nd round pick out of Penn State. Elite athlete. He's like top 100 out of like 1,100 tight ends. Scored for the athleticism. So dude can ball, and he's going to have a pretty good role, because the only other guy they have at tight end is Luke Farrell, who is not great. So I love Strange across the board here. All right, let's kick it over to flex and just talk about some guys that maybe we don't want to captain them, but we feel really good about rostering them in general. So what are your thoughts on Kincaid? His overall ownership is actually not very high. I did say before, the matchup isn't good and he hasn't been great. Those things are true, but technically speaking, he is going to be out there a good amount of the time. He was a red zone threat at Utah, 16 touchdowns in his last 2 years of college ball. And I mean, he's often open. They just didn't throw very much in week 2, and they didn't feature him in week 1. So how are you feeling about him?
I'm taking a pretty hard anti-Dalton Kincaid stance, which is the opposite of what I did in week 1 when I had him everywhere.
Yeah.
and he repaid me by shitting on my face. But like I said, I'm kind of just heavily leaning into the Jacksonville passing side of this, so I'm not as heavy on the Buffalo pass catchers. I do have Coleman, Samuel, Shakir, and even Matt Collins a little bit ahead of him. I also have Dawson Knox in one more lineup than Kincaid at a significant discount, but not really into Kincaid. That's kind of a fade I'm taking a stand on as of now.
Well, I mean, in flex, 27% isn't egregious, so I'm okay with it. But yeah, I actually agree. I was very high in Kincaid going into the season. It has not materialized whatsoever. So I'm kind of just
like all
off.
tight ends. Like no tight end is able to do anything this season.
Eventually, that stuff's got to break the other way, you would think. But the Bills, just the way they conduct business offensively, they're just not forcing it to anybody, and that's how they're so good. They just, who are you going to cover? Oh, we'll blanket Dalton Kincaid. We don't give a shit. We'll just throw to the guy who's open. Go ahead. He'll have 0 catches. We could not care less.
I like the Coleman call a lot. Like didn't do anything last week, like you said, but played a ton. The look should be there. Got looks in week 1 as well. I think he's a pretty good value at 5.8 in the flex.
Yeah, so definitely he can be played in the flex. Another big reason why I like him in the captain slot is because he is going to carry ownership. So you want some exposure to him to some degree, probably, but you're just going to get a massive leverage on the people who aren't captaining him if he hits. And I think there's a good chance he does. Okay, so moving on here, we kind of talked about all the main offensive guys. What about like any prospective backups? Like, for instance, Tank Bigsby missed last week. He was hurt. He could be back. If he's not back, Dearness Johnson got some work behind Travis Etienne. Obviously, you mentioned Curtis Samuel, who is not really playing a lot, but 27% on a showdown slate, it's not nothing. We can at least consider it because he's cheap in the flex. You mentioned Matt Collins. So any fringe guys that you feel good about in the flex just because they're cheap and they will have some kind of a role?
It's really just Strange. He's the cheapie I'm getting to the most. I think everyone else will be as well. I do have some Samuel at 4K. I don't feel good about the role at all since he's playing less than a third of the snaps so far, but
yeah,
that's always subject to change on a weekly basis. You never know what's going to happen. We're at a game also, so getting to him a bit, I think mainly as a pivot from Strange because there's not a lot else in that range that I have a lot of faith in. I'm not really getting to Ray Davis.
I was just gonna ask you. I don't know if you can captain him and feel good about it, but Ray Davis, he did get 9 carries last week.
You cannot feel good about it.
No, I know. I'm just saying, but James Cook is going to be captain 10 or more % of the time, and he's going to be owned like, what's his ownership? Crazy, probably like, yeah. Well, it's going to be more than that. 35%. That's low. It's going to be higher than that. So he's going to be owned a lot. So I think if you went Josh Allen and kind of what we're talking about before, and you ended up fading James Cook or severely underweight, that's a pretty good leverage play. He's cheap and he's not going to be owned. I actually don't hate it.
I don't think I would captain him, but I see why you'd play him.
No, not captain. No, I don't want to captain him. You need a lot more volume, or you need like explosive ability down the field to feel good about a captain punt anytime. But yeah, I mean, if he's going to approach like 10 carries and they're going to dominate on the ground again somehow, and he needs a touchdown probably to hit, but I don't know. I don't hate it as a leverage off of the Cook ownership. I think I'm with you though. Nobody else really stands out. I do remember last time we did a Bills Showdown video, you talked about Reggie Gilliam at the 200 flat. I don't think he's on my radar. Did he end up hitting for you?
Fuck no. I did not. I don't think I wanted $1 on that slate.
So did he even play is what I really want to know. Okay. But I will mention, by the way, Luke Farrell at 800. If he did have 2 catches for 13 yards. So I don't want to captain him, but at $800 at only 8% ownership in the flex, that is a monster leverage play on Strange, who will carry some ownership. I very much prefer Strange. I think he's a great play, but Farrell is live to play. You can entertain him for sure. All right, last thing we'll cover here are the kickers and the defenses. Obviously, the total isn't like amazing, and the Jaguars, like you noted before, have not been good offensively, and their defense is capable. They've been in both their games at least so far. So, with that in mind, I would imagine we should have some interest in the kickers. We got Tyler Bass here. You said Cam Little. I know I'm not afraid to admit I had never heard of Cam Little in my life. And then obviously of the Bills and Jaguars defenses. Do you have a lean here, and which of those options do you want to roster tonight?
I don't really have a lean. I'm not getting to a lot of the defenses on either side. I'm not getting to Bass at all. And like I said, I do have some Little, but defensive kickers are largely random, so it's hard to have a lot of confidence with any of it.
Yeah, I mean, Bass has been good on the year so far, 8 and 10 points in his first 2 games. I don't really trust Little himself. And the Jaguars offense, it's like kind of one of those in-between things where like the Jaguars offense is probably just good enough to get him in position, but it's not really good enough to like really guarantee those opportunities, So I'm probably out on Little. The Bills move the ball really well and they put up a lot of points. So while it's not like an easy matchup across the board, Bass looks good to me. And at 7.5K, that's in the captain. Was he a 5K flat in the flex? I'm okay with that. Because like I said, there's not a ton of guys I absolutely have to have in my lineup. It's kind of like, if I end up on this guy, that's fine. And Bass is one of those guys that I'm fine with. Don't really trust the Jaguars defense to completely shut down Buffalo in a primetime setting. So I don't really want them. Bills defense, though, considering how the Jaguars have looked, I'm okay with the Bills defense at 4.4K. The only question would be ownership. And right now we are not seeing a ton. The kickers are under 20% owned. And where the defense of Jaguars 12%, Bills 17%. So I'm okay with being a little bit overweight on Bass and the Bills, but as you mentioned, it's not something you can predict, and it's not something to ever feel really good about. But I think that's going to do it for us. I think we're pretty aligned on Josh Allen, but there's a lot of different ways you can go. Taylor's going at Jaguars heavy. My favorite play in the captain, and Taylor, right after I do it, you can kind of remind anybody who's watching where you stand. I am probably going Keon Coleman captain. I'm working Strange into the flex, and I'm definitely eating the Josh Allen chalk. And then after that, I probably am just going to pick between Etienne and Cook. And then I might go with you after that with the Jaguars guys, because Strange is part of that. Etienne might be part of that too. But I think that connection, Keon with Allen, is going to be explosive in this game. I expect the Bills passing attack to be the reason why they win instead of the running game tonight.
Yeah, I'm taking a stand with Gabe Davis as my favorite captain, just hoping he can do something against his old team, and then a dusting of Lawrence, Christian Kirk, and Brian Thomas.
All right, man. Sounds good. All right. Hopefully this helped you out. If it did, give this video a like, and thanks for watching. Good luck.